Is it permissible to keep ties with murted family members who committed a nullifier of Islam and refused to repent from it after being advised and given da'wah? I spoke in the past pertaining to the ruling about a fasiq and a kafir and a mubtada and the danger of associating with them, and some opinions or statements of ulama pertaining to that, especially after they're advised and they refuse to accept the haqq. Some of what was mentioned there applies to this question which pertains to a murted. However, a murted or a murtadda, an apostate, is obviously much worse than a fasiq, but he's even worse than an original kafir. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala said the sunnah has been settled that the punishment of a murted is worse than an original kafir, and he mentioned various ways how a murted is worse than an original kafir. He said a murted must be executed under Islamic state rule, and jizya is not accepted from them, and he can't become among the people of dhimma, the ones protected under Muslim rule, like original kuffar from Ahl al-Kitab. A murted also gets his punishment whether he's a fighter or not, unlike an original kafir, according to many ulama, as Ibn Taymiyyah stated. He also said a murtad's dhabiha, sacrifice or marriage into them, is not accepted, unlike an original kafir from Ahl al-Kitab. If a kafir who remains on his kufr should be abandoned and forsaken on the conditions we stated in a previous question, after one gives them nasiha and then gives up hope in conveying da'wah, then it's more essential in the case of a murtad, even if he's the closest of relatives. Keep in mind, ridda can be by the heart, like hatred of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or the ahkam of the deen. Could also be verbally, by saying something. And that's like what's unfortunately common in some communities of cursing Allah wal-iyadhu billah, or mocking the deen or matters of the deen. Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali said one who abuses the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a murtad, even if he says the shahada and he loses the sanctity given to Muslims. Ridda can also be through limbs, by, for example, desecrating the Quran, or it could be by leaving some matters of the deen, like salah, in the correct of two opinions on that matter. The question states that the murtad or murtadda was advised and continuously advised, and they showed no sign of returning to Islam. Basically, the person is given up hope on them. In that situation, a Muslim should keep away, forsake, abandon that person, even if he's the closest of relatives, which means to do hajr on them, not sitting with them, not speaking with them, not having any relationship or ties with them, severing all ties with them. Giving da'wah is good until one sees there's most likely no more hope. And when I say to give da'wah first, it's because even under a Khalifa has his judges who can impose the had of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on that murtad. He can impose it with strength and power. Even in that strong status, according to the majority and correct opinion, a murtad is given a chance for istitaba. In fact, some ulama related in ijma' that a murtad gets a chance for istitaba, meaning a chance to come back to Islam before the punishment is carried out. Ibn Qudama said it was the opinion of Umar and Ali radiallahu anhum, among other ulama. They disputed the amount of times he's told, or the amount of days for istitaba, like is it 3 days, more or less? That's a side issue. There's some forms of ridda that are referred to as al-ridda al-mughalladha. There's no istitaba for them when presented to the Khalifa or his judges. There's no istitaba applicable for them. That's like some matters of zandaqa or slander or mocking of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If one is able to give da'wah, and he's strong in his iman and knowledge, and he knows he will not be affected, then he's strongly recommended to give da'wah to the murtad as the person asking stated they already had done. If he or she thinks they may be affected by their doubts, then they resort directly to hajr. Some matters like mocking or abusing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are easy to advise a murted on, and rarely do they affect the one given da'wah, even if they're among the regular Muslims. There's some complex arguments that are presented by atheists and agnostics who are murtadeen that may affect some who may not be firm in knowledge or iman. If one given da'wah is not strong, it may cause him doubts, so he should go to hajr without da'wah to them. Forsaken a murtad who refuses to come back is the least one can do in our obligations towards inkar al-munkar. And it's a severe munkar. That's number one. Number two, it's to safeguard one's own religion. If ulama, as we mentioned previously, deterred from mingling with mubtadi'a and kuffar and fusaq, then murtaddeen are classified as much worse, as I stated. Third of all, hajr of a murtad is also a deterrent for him to rethink his evil path, and a deterrent for others not to follow in that course. When the relatives abandon that murtad, along with the community, the Muslims in general, the ulama, shuyukh and leaders, it gives an alert to others to stay away from this ideology, and that we don't condone nor tolerate that. The hajr of a murtad is part of wala and bara, wal mu'adah fillah. Mu'adah fillah. The least Muslims can do to combat the spread of ridda in all its forms is to show their displeasure at it by abandoning those who fall for it after nasiha. If that action is not taken, ridda will become a norm, and it will spread, and it is spreading. And the least way to combat that is under our means and control, to shun and abandon the murtaddeen. Ibn Muflih said, وَأَمَّا الْمُرْتَدُّونَ فَإِنَّ الصَّحَابَةَ بَايَنُوهُمْ بِالْقِتَالِ وَأَيُّ هَجْرٍ أَعْظَمُ مِنْ هَذَا. The form of hajr, deserting, that the Sahaba did to the murtaddeen is fighting them. What mightier form of hajr is there than that? The Sahaba fought them. You can't at least abandon them? This question reminds me of a story Al-Qadi Iyad mentioned. It occurred during the time of one of the leaders of Al-Andalus. His name was Abd al-Rahman ibn al-Hakam al-Amawi. He was the fourth Amawi leader in Qurtuba. He became the leader around 206 years after the Hijrah, at the age of approximately 30 after the death of his father, and he remained the leader until he died at the age of 62. One time it began to rain, and a man known in the story as the nephew of Ajab. When it began to rain, this man, the nephew of Ajab, nephew of a woman named Ajab, he said a disrespectful statement pertaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as it was raining upon them. The man who said the statement is the nephew of Ajab. That's all the story says about him. That's how he's titled. His name is not there. Ajab is the wife of the Amir of Al-Andalus, Abd al-Rahman ibn al-Hakam al-Amawi. Not any wife, but his most beloved wife. The man who said that statement was her brother's son, her nephew. Two scholars, Ibn Habib and Asbagh ibn Khalil, from the ulama and fuqaha of Qurtuba, said this man, his punishment is to be executed. The rest, in majority of the fuqaha, said he doesn't need to be executed. It was just vain talk. Just teach him a lesson and let him go about in his way. The judge, Musa ibn Ziyad, went along with the majority of the fuqaha. Ibn Habib said, he needs to be executed and his blood is on my neck. meaning I take full responsibility before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his blood. Ibn Habib said, دمه في عنقي أيشتم رب عبدناه ثم لا ننتصر له إنا إذا لعبيد السوء ما نحن له بعابدين. Ibn Habib began to cry. He said, how can we not give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala victory when he gets abused? We're then truly evil slaves and not true worshippers of him. The dispute now went above the judge to the Amir, to Abd al-Rahman ibn al-Hakam al-Amawi himself. He studied the dispute and he ordered the execution of his wife's nephew. And he ordered that alim, Ibn Habib and his friend, to witness the execution in honor of them. And he ordered his wife's nephew to be crucified after the execution. Then he scolded and abused the ulama who refused to give the fatwa of execution, and he dismissed the judge Musa ibn Ziyad from his position for being too soft and for compromising. This was the nephew of the Amir's wife. He could have easily said, I'm going with the majority of the ulama. He could have easily said, I need to follow what my appointed judge ordered, not to go forth with the execution. It's not worthy of execution. To the Amir, to the few ulama, it was serious. What type of muwahideen and Muslimin are we not to at least abandon and do hajar on a murted who learned the haqq and tawheed and then became its enemy? And there's many verses on that. Ridda is a form of treason and subversion and sedition. And it's sedition against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam and the deen and the believers. They accept sedition in the US in particular and in other countries as well, but they accept it here as the highest crime, punishable by the highest penalty. But they object to the laws of Islam on that. Ibn Habib said, أَيُشْتَمُ رَبٌّ عَبَدْنَاهُ ثُمَّ لَا نَنْتَصِرُ لَهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gets abused, yet we don't give him victory. Is there anything less than abandoning the murted as a form of wala and bara and as a form of inkar of a munkar, a mighty munkar? One who associates with such a family member or mingles with them after advising them hasn't really gotten to know Allah. The soul of ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to honor and love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. مَا لَكُمْ لَا تَرْجُونَ لِلَّهِ وَقَارًا وَمَا قَدَرُ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدْرِهِ. Abdullah, the son of Imam Ahmed, rahimahumullah, said, we were walking one time and we overheard someone teaching a hadith pertaining to the descendant of Allah. And he misinterpreted it. He gave a wrong explanation pertaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descendant. He said, my father began to shake. Speaking about Allah. He said, my father began to shake and he turned pale and he held my hand and I had to hold him firm until he calmed down. Then he said, let's go talk to this liar and correct him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to respect and hold in high regard his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That includes his teachings. إِنَّا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ شَاهِدًا وَمُبَشِّرًا وَنَذِيرًا لِتُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَتُعَزِّرُوهُ وَتُوَقِّرُوهُ وَتُسَبِّحُوهُ بُكْرَةً وَأَصِيلًا. In another verse, فَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِهِ وَعَزَّرُوهُ وَنَصَرُوهُ. To honor, to glorify the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And of course that applies to his teachings as well. So for a murtad who doesn't recant, hajar is the least of the solutions to free yourself from blame when you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. مَعْذِرَةً إِلَىٰ رَبِّكُمْ وَلَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ.